Okay. All right, it's January 18th, and this is the Duxbury Board of Health. And just read into the minutes pursuant to Chapter 2, the Acts of 2023. This meeting will be conducted via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time by the Duxbury Government Access Channel for Verizon 39 or Comcast 8. Viewers can visit www.pac-tv.org/Duxbury for information about Duxbury programming, including streaming on Duxbury YouTube, or watch replays and video on demand. Okay. Our first order of business is 97 Wellington Lane.
Good evening. Tracy, would you like me to proceed?
Yes, go right ahead.
For the record, my name is George Collins from Collins Civil Engineering Group. I'm a registered professional engineer. I'm representing David Marsoki for 97 Wellington Lane for a local Board of Health waiver and a local upgrade approval request. Would you like me to share my screen at this time?
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Let's see, hopefully I can find this. Apologize, I am not. I apologize, I am not seeing. I have it on my screen, but I don't have it. It's not popping up as this something I can select. I apologize.
George, I can share the plan if you'd like, George.
Okay, yeah, that'd be terrific. I apologize. I have my letter, but I don't have my plan. Strangely. Yeah, so basically this property is located on the east side of Wellington Lane. And we went out and did a percolation test and water table determination, and the plumbing because of the plumbing exits the house under the slab. There's basement plumbing. There's a basement toilet. We don't have an opportunity to manipulate the plumbing and raise it. In some cases, we can raise the plumbing to bring the system up a little bit higher. So in this particular case, because we cannot manipulate the plumbing the way the water table and ground surface ended up working out, the two parts of the regulations that were not be able to be accommodated was the leaching field ended up being approximately 4 feet in the ground, and Title V only allows a maximum of 3 feet, the system to be 3 feet under the ground. So we've applied for a local upgrade approval that will allow 4 feet of cover over the leaching components. The septic tank does not have too much cover over the system. It's exclusively the leaching field. We are speccing out a pipe and stone system, which are very, very stable and not subject to collapse like the plastic chambers. So I think structurally it's a good fit. And then we've also specced out a vent for the system, which is I put on all of my designs regardless. But in this case it's required because the system is too deep in the ground. So that's the first project relief that we need, is for too much cover over the leaching field. And then the other requirement is a waiver from the town of Duxbury supplemental rules and regulations. It's section 1.11, which requires a 6-foot water table separation when you have a 2-minute or less percolation rate. Under these circumstances, Title V, the state code, only requires a 5-foot separation, but your local regulations require a 6-foot separation. And again, because we cannot manipulate the plumbing in the house and bring the system height any higher, the way this design worked out, we were only able to get 5.6 feet of separation, which meets state code, but it does not meet the 6-foot requirement under the supplemental rules and regulations. So that is the second item of relief that we need for this project. A couple things to be aware of is the leaching field. Strangely, the zone 2 line actually runs right through the site, but the leaching field itself is completely out of the zone 2 area. So it's technically not in a water protection district. And again, we do meet the state requirement for water table separation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that the agent or board may have at this time.
I don't have any. I just want to make the board aware that this existing system failed a Title V inspection. So they are replacing the failed system.
Hey,
I don't have any questions.
I just have a quick question for Mr. Collins. As far as the cover over the leaching field, was there any other kind of alternatives that you considered to reduce that 4 feet?
There really isn't, just effectively the top of the system, the way the elevations work, and you have a fixed elevation coming out of with the pipe coming out of the house, and then you have the fixed elevation over the system. The two things you could do, which I think neither would be a good idea, is you could excavate a hole around it, but you'd literally be creating a depression over the system, which wouldn't function properly from a surface water perspective. So we would not do that. And then the other thing that we could do is you could put in a pump system for this project. Pump systems add, if you don't have to touch the electrical service if you have a suitable electrical service, it's usually $3,500 to $4,000. And then in some cases, if you have to upgrade this electrical service, that can add another $1,500. So it could be in a $4,000 to $6,000 cost increase for that. So, and then this does fall under the DEP local upgrade approval process. So, there are some alternatives. I think they're poor alternatives, I think this is a good way to go. Have a gravity fed system invented as required, which is required by Title V under these circumstances. So I apologize. I'm just kind of rambling on, but hopefully I've answered your question.
Yeah, and I guess there's no plans for like plantings or anything like that over this septic leaching field?
No, it's actually in a lawn area. There's two small trees that have to come down to build this, but it's in a lawn area in the backyard, and with the exception of the so there won't be any plantings or anything going over it. In fact, there's going to be a little bit of vegetation removal because of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I tend to agree with you. And it looks like it's fairly flat, all 50 feet all across the whole area.
Yeah, there's like 1.5 feet of elevation over the whole.
Yeah.
Property. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing, I don't know if you require 2 compartment tanks, but just a standard practice of mine is I spec out a 2 compartment tank on all projects. Just as I think it's. Do you have a 2 compartment tank requirement, Tracy? I apologize. So that's something that I highly recommend on every project everywhere. Ironically, it's required on anything except for single family residential, and I feel like single family residential needs it more than other places. So, but I do have supplemental settling with the 2 compartment tank, which I think is just a nice, easy, passive way of supplementing the treatment that's provided by the tank.
Are there any additional questions, Bruce or Mike?
Said one question, when you get that pumped out the tank, do you end up pumping out both sides of that or just the?
Yes, there's two covers to grade, and maintenance is done. You know, there's a 1,000-gallon compartment towards the house, and then a 500-gallon compartment towards the D box. But
Okay.
those are, you know, instead of having one cover to grade, you have two covers to grade.
Ready for a vote? Everybody okay? Bruce, any more questions? Okay. So I make a motion to grant a Title V local upgrade approval to 310 CMR 15.221B to allow the leaching field to be 48 inches below grade versus the maximum of 68 inches.
Maximum, or just one
I
correction,
second
maximum
the motion.
36 inches, right?
Yes, I said to be 48 below grade versus the maximum of 36 inches.
Okay, second.
You're checking on me. That's good.
Second.
All those in favor are aye.
Aye.
Great. Motion carries. Second, we'll move to grant a variance to Duxbury Supplementary Rules and Regulations 1.111B to allow a 5.6-foot groundwater separation versus the 6 feet in soils with a percolation rate of less than 2 minutes or less per inch.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you
Motion
very much
carries.
for your time.
Oh, we're not done yet. Just comments and
Oh, I
findings, and then
apologize.
we'll be done.
I apologize. Getting ahead of myself.
One, this is an existing 3-bedroom dwelling with no proposed increase in flow. The property does not fall within a zone 2. The system is not designed for a garbage grinder. And lastly, this property failed a Title V inspection on September 18th, 2003. Now we're done.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thanks, Tracy, for your help.
Okay, second on our agenda is Keens Mill Village.
Good evening. Scott Fenner with Grady Consulting. Here on behalf of the applicant, John Baldwin. I'd like to share my screen here. Can everybody see the screen? Okay. So this is Keens Mill Village. It is part of a 16 single-family proposed development. It is part of a 40B development. The project has been approved by the ZBA and by the Conservation Commission. For this project, we're designing 2 septic systems. So we've broken the area up into 2 areas. So up here is North Hamlet, and there's 2 single-family dwellings, which will each have their separate septic tank, and they'll go into a field up in this area. And then the South Hamlet, it's another 14 units, and those go through a series of sewage manholes to collect all of the wastewater. It goes through a series of tanks into, again, a Presby field. Both systems, they are fully compliant with the state regulation. The reason that we are here tonight is we are seeking a variance for the local regulation, section 1.15, construction and fill. So I'm going to go over to the North Hamlet. So with this system, we were able to design, we're able to fit on here a conventional system with the reserve area, but we feel it's a better alternative to design a Presby system. Presby systems essentially can take up a smaller footprint, and they're really good for these larger flow type of systems. This system here is pretty standard. It's what you'd really see with a normal single family. This system here is a little bit larger. Zoom in some of these houses. So for example, this unit 8 here, each house will have an individual line that will feed out into this main sewer line. The sewer line flows by gravity for the purposes of here, from the right of the screen down to the left of the screen. It then goes through a series of a couple of tanks. So we have a 10,000 gallon tank, which serves as the first compartment, and then into a 5,000 gallon tank, which serves as the second compartment. And then it goes through 2 series of pump chambers. The reason for having 2 pump chambers is essentially to provide chamber storage in the event of a power outage, which is required by Title V. The effluent is then pumped up into this area, into a splitter box, which then splits it into these 2 fields where it's dispersed. So as part of the section 1.15 requirements, we did submit stormwater management design and calculations. Again, that was part of the 40B process. And this design was subject to the peer review. So we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Karen, do you want Pat Brennan to maybe speak on his review of the plan?
Yeah, I was just taking a look at what was sent. So yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pat Brennan. I reviewed this design for the Board of Health. I also reviewed the project for the Zoning Board of Appeals when it was going through the 40B process. So as Scott mentioned, the stormwater was all designed, it was all reviewed during that process. So we didn't have to reinvent the wheel with this submission. I did submit a letter, excuse me, to the board last week, which I had 14 comments in it. Subsequent to that, subsequent to that, they submitted revised plans yesterday, and I submitted another letter first thing this morning after reviewing those plans. So what I'll do is I'll kind of run through my comments fairly quickly, just to tell you what the comments were, how they addressed them, and where we are at this point in time. My first comment was about the venting on Presby systems. You need both a high and a low vent. They had them both on the D-box ends of the system, and my recommendation was to put the high vent on one end and the low vents on the other, just so you get better venting throughout the entire system. It allows that airflow to go, through the entire field, so it's not being short-circuited right at basically the beginning of the fields. So they did make that change. My second comment you can ignore because that was a mistake on my part about sizing of the conventional system. They do show a full-size conventional primary system and reserve areas on this plan. They're lightly shaded underneath these Presby beds that you see there. So my third comment was about showing reserve areas for the Presby beds. In the response from Scott, they referenced the standard conditions for the alternative soil absorption systems with general use certification, which is the Mass DEP, basically approval of these types of systems. And what that requires is showing the full-size primary and reserve conventional systems, which they show. They also referenced the standard conditions for the Presby system, which does require the separate reserve area to be shown. And what Grady had said was that in the event of the need for a system replacement, they would recommend the system be removed and replaced in the same location. And the reason for that is that the beds that you see in this one here are outside the roadway. The reserve area, if we were to show it, would be under the roadway. In Presby, you're not supposed to put Presby systems under pavement. So that's why they would like to do it the way they show it. They do, again, conform with the conventional system siting requirements for both the reserve and the primary systems. So they do have the room for conventional if they ever had to go that route in the future. The fourth comment was about the North Hamlet system. They didn't have any test pits within they had test pits on that area of the site, but not within the footprints of the leaching beds. So Scott and I actually went out on Monday and did some additional soil testing. And that soil testing changed the design a little bit. We actually had better perk rates, but a little bit higher groundwater. So the design of that system was adjusted accordingly. So that comment was addressed. I had some comments about the pump design information, and they had the same information for both systems. They have changed that. There's different design calculations for each, as there should be. Same thing with storage capacities. They changed all the calculations on that so that they're all correct now. There was a detail on the pump chamber for this system that's on the screen, where they were showing a 4-inch line within the tank, and everything else specified a 3-inch line. So they changed that to specify a 4-inch line as well. So that was addressed. And again, there's a comment about the pumps being the same with the same operating conditions, and they've changed that. There's 2 different pump systems, 2 different operating conditions, so 2 different pumps specified. My next comment was about the float systems. They called out a 4-float system for the smaller North Hamlet system, but they showed 3 floats in the tank, and they've changed that to a 4-float system. So that's been corrected. They had some incorrect elevations on the profile or on the tank details and pump details for the larger system, which they've corrected. The inspection ports in the Presby systems are required to be wrapped in geotextile fabric, so they corrected the details showing that. They didn't have benchmarks within close proximity to the systems. Your rules and regulations require them to be within 75 feet, so they added those benchmarks to the plans. I'm going to skip over the next one. Well, actually, the next one is the one that I kind of wanted to bring to the board's attention. They submitted the architectural plans with the design, which is required. You guys require floor plans to show how many bedrooms are in the units. And the architectural plans show basically they have different units, but they all show a master bedroom on the first floor, 2 other bedrooms on the second floor with a bonus, something called a bonus room. And that bonus room could very easily be converted to bedroom. And this actually came up during the ZBA process as well. I believe one of the zoning board conditions was that they could only have the 3 bedrooms. But I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. I know that we've run into this before, and I think this is one of the issues. Because once everybody's living there, there's really, you don't have much control over what's going on. So, there's some, I've seen some people in the architectural designs make it like a 6-foot doorway opening, maybe do a half wall or something to that effect so that it's not a closed off room. But I wanted to bring it to the board's attention so that you could have that discussion with the developer and see what the intentions are there. And then my last comment was just about, with these types of alternative systems, there are standard conditions from DEP that go along with them. I attached them to my letter that I sent today. So if it is approved, I would just recommend that those conditions be attached to that approval. And that's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions. But again, I think the big thing here is maybe having that discussion with Mr. Baldwin about the bonus room in the units.
Is he here tonight, look, to speak to the bonus room?
John, yes, John is on, I just promoted him, so, John, if you're able to talk to that would be great.
How about now? Can you hear me all right?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, well, for starters, we provided, in the orders of conditions from the zoning board of appeals, it says we can only have 3 bedrooms. And if we were to be able to convert, first off, the room can only be a room, a bonus room, if it gets insulated and so forth and so on. But even if it were, you need to get a permit to do that after the fact. If somebody was going to do that after the fact, I have no control over that after I've sold the house. But if somebody wanted to do the bonus room, then we would, while we were building it, and they were going to use it for a computer room or whatever, we could easily just take at the top of the stairs, have a railing across, so the whole room's open, just like a loft room with no door, and it wouldn't be considered a bedroom, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. What do you think, Tracy? What have you been doing in the past with rooms like that?
so they basically can't afford privacy, so they'd have to have oversized, like Pat was saying, the oversized doorway, open
Yeah.
out to another room. Are you finishing those bonus rooms with the build, or is that just available if people want to finish them?
Well, I mean, the architect drew it in. I don't have any plans of finishing them at all. As
Okay,
a matter of
I'm
fact,
just curious.
no, I don't have any plans of doing that. If somebody wanted to, because they needed the space, because they wanted to have some sort of like, for instance, let's say they wanted to have a living room upstairs because they have the master down. A lot of the people who live in these places, there's only 2 people living in there. So they have kids over, they have other friends over. And I've done this in the past when I've been building houses, where they would turn that into like a living room upstairs. So the guests would have their own little space up there. And so we would open it up. We did this over to East Street. I came before the board. Originally, we could only do a 2-bedroom, but we ended up, Pat was on that same thing. We ended up with nitrogen credits from another piece of property, so we ended up being able to do the 3-bedroom. But we did exactly what we said. We ended up being a 2-bedroom house because one of the bedrooms upstairs, we opened it up, and we had the railing at the top of the stairs, where the wall was just a regular railing with balusters. So the whole thing was completely open, and that's how we dealt with it.
I think what we've done in the past is asked for these rooms to be open or to have a very, very large door. I really think that's what we've done.
Yeah,
It is,
absolutely.
and we can put in our approval, just as zoning did in their conditions, that they're limited to 3 bedrooms. And, we can, if we want to be more specific regarding if there's a bonus room, it has to be open to the other room. We could, but we can just say it can only be 3 bedrooms. Because Pat is right. What we've had in the past at other places is that they have extra space, so someone tries to finish it and wants to do a bedroom, and they end up having to either get rid of another room if they want that to be a bedroom, or they have to do these sorts of things where you have a large opening, so it doesn't afford privacy. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this get reviewed by the Conservation Commission or no?
It's already been reviewed and approved.
I had one question on the leaching field. how far that is from the property line?
So in this lower area here, it's only required to be 10 feet off the property line. So the conventional system is shown 10 feet off the property line. Looks like we don't have a dimension to the Presby, but by eye, it looks to be about 30 feet.
I just measured it's 20 feet.
20, okay.
And the Presby system can be underneath the pavement? Or it
Yep,
cannot?
it can be. They do require this geogrid area to basically protect any weight above the system.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm happy to see this Presby system. And I was also wondering if is this typical, this fairly large project, is it typical that when a consultant discovers this many discrepancies, is that, I mean, it's just a discrepancy on the drawings. And of course the perk tests are interesting, but is this typically what you would find, Mr. Brown?
Yes, it is. Like you mentioned, most of the comments were just plan edits. The test pits, there was on between the two sites, there's been, I think, over 30 test pits done. So they just, I don't think that when they designed it, I don't think they realized that they didn't have two test pits within that northern system. But there's test pits all over the property. So yeah, it is fairly common for this many comments. Most of them, again, were just editorial in nature.
Yeah, yes, that's okay. Thank you, and I'm happy to see this system.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a quick question. On the back side of these units, is all the runoff supposedly going into that basin? Is that the intent for the grading?
Let me just zoom this out here if I can. So there's a couple of basins for this lower area here. These basins here essentially collects runoff through series of catch basins in the roadway, which then go down into these basins. From the rear of the house, you can see from about 10 feet back of the front of the houses, you can see it does slope backwards. So the split line is probably about the front of the houses, and it goes backwards into this basin back here.
Yeah,
There's
I mean,
also there's a roof. Oh, sorry to cut you off. There's also a roof drain collection system for each unit. So for these units over here, we're able to design individual subsurface storage for the roof drains, and for these units, looks like 6 to 1. Those go into the larger system.
yeah, just looking at the drainage on the, on the opposite of the roadside, I would just suggest adding grade to drain, in front of units 1 to 4, and then in front of 10 and 11, arrows basically pointing into that basin, if that's the intent, where it's supposed to go, as opposed to into the wetlands. I mean, it is kind of shoehorning everything into this lot. But if the idea is to kind of keep that runoff draining away from the wetlands and collecting in one certain location, it's tough to say that's going to happen the way it's drawn now, with the contours. without having some kind of pitch going towards that basin.
If
Would you?
if I may, so to speak to that, as Scott was saying, what they're doing is they're collecting all the runoff from the impervious surfaces, both from the roadway and from the roofs. The only runoff that is running straight down toward the wetland and not going through one of those basins is the runoff from the grass area. And it's, like Scott says, basically just from between the houses and through the backyard. And when they did their analysis, that's how it was modeled. They modeled those pervious surfaces running straight to the wetlands and the impervious surfaces all being routed through the stormwater system. So it, you know, their calculations meet all the stormwater standards. They're not allowed to increase the rates of runoff to the wetlands, and their calculations show that. And the main reason for that is all the roof infiltration systems and the infiltration basins that they have for the roadway runoff. So they are mitigating the runoff to the standards that they're required to. I believe they also are mitigating the volume of runoff, which isn't necessarily required by the stormwater standards, but it is required by the Duxbury Planning Board rules and regulations. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that they mitigated both rate and volume on this project.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? So I think we need to approve the plan with the conditions that Mr. Brennan had put in his letter, and additionally specifying that this just be 3-bedroom dwellings. Anything else that we want to add to that? Bruce, anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Well, what was your 3-bedroom comment again?
So that we would specify that this is for a 3-bedroom dwelling, right? Because they have the bonus room. So Tracy suggested that we specify that this is, if we approve this, a 3-bedroom dwelling.
Yeah, but I'd like to see us say that bonus room should be open.
Okay, we can do that too. Mike, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think just like you were saying, adding a wording in there to define the opening to that bonus room, whether it's 6 feet wide and, you know, to remain open. That should be okay.
Yeah, and that would only, John Baldwin, that would only be if it was insulated and heated and so forth. I mean, it's obvious. Otherwise, it's just going to be closed off completely. And it would be it could be a cold attic space, but I mean, if that's the case, then it's going to be closed off.
Are we all okay with that? I vote to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to our third agenda item, which is the continued discussion with the Duxbury Safe Water Committee regarding concerns to the town's public water supply. I think we have Mrs. Chen here tonight.
Thank you. I just have a brief update. There's not a lot of new information. I don't know whether you noticed in the Boston Globe the day before Christmas, there was a strong editorial in favor of the legislation that Massachusetts should ban PFAS in consumer products. And hopefully that's going to help the legislation that is currently in the committee of Public Health Committee. I got in touch with Josh Cutler and his office, and my understanding is that the first week of February, it's either got to come out of committee, voted favorably and sent to Ways and Means, or it's essentially dead in the water. And then it would be refiled at some point down the road. The current session ends though July of 2024. So if it gets into Ways and Means, we've got 6 months to try and massage it so that everybody can accept it. But I wanted to make a mention that there are 5 more additional bills that pertain to PFAS. And they're all sort of specific. There's a public health based one. There's a disposal of PFAS. There's soil and farming concentrations. There's 2 of them. And there's one on commercial products. So they're sort of individually targeting different areas that PFAS is going to affect the world. And that's it on the PFAS generally at the state level. We also have the 2 articles that the warrant articles that are going to go before town meeting in March. And the first one is prioritization plan, and it's going to be developing a mitigation plan that will require conceptual design for each of Duxbury's wells, determine the required technology to reduce PFAS, a lot of more terminology, and that's going to be a $610,000 budget item. And then the second one is PFAS mitigation design. And it's going to get into the permitting of the different priority projects for the town, especially if the EPA drops the contaminant level to 4, which is going to impact many more wells. And that's $1 million project. My understanding in talking with the Fiscal Advisory Committee last night is that they don't expect the funding to come out of town coffers. They expect that grant that came through Plymouth County, that we have access to $4 million, that they're going to hopefully be able to tap that and use that money for these 2 articles. And the thought is that we need to get a step ahead of other communities that may be dragging their feet a little bit, because once we have a plan in place, we have to go out for bid, and there's only so many companies that can do that mitigation on the wells, and they're going to be lined up for business. And we'd like to get our foot in the door and be at the top of that list and not at the bottom of the list. That's where I am at this point with PFAS, and I thank you so much for continuing your interest in it.
Becky, do you want to mention the forum that's coming up?
Oh, yes, next Tuesday night at the high school in the small, I think it's called the Black Box Theater. There is a forum on PFAS, and it's a very knowledgeable person from Silent Springs. It's going to be presenting. It's from 7 to 8:30, and I believe more information will come out. Thanks, Tracy, for reminding me.
Thank
And we
you.
hope you will attend.
So Becky, who is it that's leading the charge to get these grants?
There is a joint committee. The Duxbury Water and Sewer Advisory Committee is sort of totally on it. The town created a committee, and Candy Martin, who used to be on Physical Advisory, is the chair of this ad hoc committee on PFAS. And they're having meetings every couple of weeks, and they meet at the senior center, and they're developing. They do have a plan in place, or they've already talked about Duxbury wells as they sit today, where the priorities would be based on the pumping, the age of the wells and their pumping capacity. And some of them, Tremont Street's got 2 wells together. Evergreen Street has 2 wells together. They're not connected, but if they had to be connected in some form, we're looking at a lot more money. And we're also looking at the actual design of the wells, how they can be mitigated for PFAS, what type of filter is going to be acceptable, how we can put it on site. So those committees, that one committee that has members from the Duxbury Sewer and Water Advisory Committee, And the chairman, Tanya, is on that committee, and I listen in, because most of the time they do have them available. Although the Zoom capacity at the senior center is not great. So that's where I got the draft warrant articles that I just spoke to you about, and they're using the engineers that are from environmental partners, but they cost $4,000 a month to use those people. And so I think the town is looking financially how not to use them all the time. And Weston and Sampson is another report that's due out, and I haven't seen the draft of it yet. And that's on the McNeil dump as well as the town transfer station.
And Becky, do you know who the point of contact is for who's applying for the grant? Is there some specific person that's applying for the money?
Supposedly environmental partners are supposed to do that as
Okay.
part of their description of their contract with the town.
Okay.
And we hope.
We don't want to miss out on that opportunity.
Absolutely not. The town, though, did receive a grant from that pot of money to mitigate the Partridge Street well, and it was determined that it's such a small well and it's so old, it's not worth putting $800,000 into it. It's better to, and actually what they had to do was turn that money back and say the town can't use it for that because it's specified purpose, and they're going to have to reapply. And I understand, and Environmental Partners did that first grant proposal, and I understand they're going to continue in that capacity as the grant writer for this project. The town did join the 3M lawsuit, the class action lawsuit, and we haven't heard what the town may or may not get from that. But we have documentation that 3M, the manufacturing company in Rockland that makes tape, dump their rejects into McNeil dump on a regular basis. And we have samples, and they've been tested, and we have affidavits that witnessed the 3M company dumping over the decades.
So, so the ad hoc committee then works with the consultant or is working with the select board?
A member of the select board, Fernande, sits on that ad hoc committee and has attended the meetings. The environmental partners, as well as a representative from Weston and Sampson, have sat in on some of those meetings, and they get a fee to do that. The last meeting, environmental partners was not present at, but they can be contacted, but they have to get contacted through the select board office. But Fernande Guitar is a select board member who is sitting in on those meetings and coming up to speed and making sure the select board is informed of what needs to happen and what is happening.
So, and you're sitting in to listen, but you're not a member?
I am not a member,
Okay,
but
so,
I've been invited to sit in on them.
but Tanya is a member, and so
She
does she discuss this in her meetings that Melissa attends?
Yes,
So Melissa is sitting in on the sewage and water committee meetings, and then she could, if she wants to, report back to us or keep us informed, as well as you.
yes, absolutely. I'm not aware that she is attending all of those meetings because they're all in-person meetings. But I know she has attended or spoken to Tanya. Tanya is the chairperson of the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee.
Right.
And our water superintendent does attend those meetings, as well as our DPW director I think she also attends those meetings on a fairly regular basis. I mean, we have a very good committee that is working really diligently for the town.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the update and all the hard work that you put into this and the rest of the group throughout the years. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, going on to item number 4. So we have our dashboard and we have our update on 86 South Street.
Lauren, do you want to talk about the dashboard?
Sure. Good evening. So I put together a dashboard based off of our permitting software like I did last month. So these are the numbers from December 6th through today. We've had 24 inspections, which include septic, housing, and food. We've had 1 perk test, 3 complaints, and those include new complaints and or complaints that we're still working on. We've had 10 disposal system construction permit applications come in, 96 pumping records, 16 Title V reports / reviews, 0 well permits. And then these next items are just part of the annual renewals that are happening now in January. 6 keeping of animal permits, 9 food establishment permits, and 24 septic installer and septic hauler permits. And those are still coming in and being entered in. I don't know if you have any questions.
Oh, thank you. And I know this isn't on the dashboard, but didn't you and Tracy become pool certified, or I'm not sure what the right term for that is?
I just went to class to recertify. Lauren did hers last year. So
Yeah.
yes, we're certified.
So I learned that they had to, both Lauren and Tracy have to be certified to manage the pool. So I learned something.
Yes, it's every 5 years. It's a lot of math involved, so. But I also have, some information from Kathy Carney, if you
Okay.
would like that too, because she couldn't be on the meeting. So, she did her stats from November 16th, that meeting, until, January 17th. So there's been 120 cases of COVID. 101 of those are over the age of 18. Lyme disease, she has 12. Influenza A, there's 61 cases of that. Influenza B, 4. Anaplasmosis, 1, and hepatitis C, 1. And when you look at the state dashboard for respiratory illnesses, influenza A seems to be the high one in that time span that probably this was, you know, there's always a lag time on the state website with that. But that was the highest respiratory illness appeared during that time period. So that's all I have with that.
Thank you. Any questions about that?
Oh, sorry. Would you like me to talk about 86 South Street?
That's the next subject.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry. Okay, so Lauren and I and the building inspectors and the fire captain went out in January, the beginning of January, to do a reinspection of the property. The company called BioOne had been hired to clean out the filth, trash items out of there and to clean anything related to that. That was their task that they were hired to do. So we did an inspection, which I did send the photos and the reports and the letters that were sent to the homeowner. It was very different than when we went the first time. But there's still quite a bit that needs to be done. It's not able to be removed as of yet, the placard. There's just to go over the list briefly, the main things are there's no heat because the oil hasn't been filled. There's no refrigerator, there's no smoke alarms up. It still has to be really cleaned and sanitized before you could move back in there. the door has to be fixed so that it's secure. So things like that. And we've talked with the homeowner about that. We were supposed to have met him with contractors so that he can let them in, because the company that cleaned the house originally, their job is done with what they were hired to do. So now it's contractors that have to install and repair things for the handyman kind of stuff. And also a cleaning company that would come in to clean what's there now. The companies that we were going to be out there with to let them in, they canceled. So we haven't been back to the property since then. So he's aware that he can't go there without us being present. He's only allowed to go there to allow somebody into the home, not stay there. Has to give us 48 hours notice during work time so that Lauren and I, or myself and the building inspector, can be there at the site while they're there to go in to do that. So it seems as if he's trying to progress to fix the items that are left on the report. So I'll keep you posted on that. And we'll kind of go from there.
So do any of you have to remain there while they are doing whatever they're doing to the house?
Not while they're doing the work on it. So like as the cleaning, that company came to, when they did the removal, they have to notify us that they're out there. The difference will be that if the homeowner is going to really be there, we don't want him to stay at the property.
I understand. Yeah.
After the contractor leaves. So that's why we're present there. And he's been made aware that we will meet him out there, and his job is to let in who's going to do the work. And that it's not to do the work himself, because I don't think he's able to do that anyway. But
Okay.
also it's not to stay there. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, no, we're not gonna stay, we're not staying there while they fix the windows and everything. So not when it's 10 degrees out either.
Right.
So,
You know, so I think he's trying. When I spoke with him today, he has a meeting with Old Colony Elder Services. There are a lot of services now that the home has been cleaned of some of the items out of there. Old Colony Elder Services, I know from speaking with them in the last couple months, they do offer like a house cleaning service. They do provide food as like kind of like a Meals on Wheels sort of thing. There are services that they can provide. So hopefully some of those things will be things that he can partake in. You know, they would never have gone in to clean what was there before, but once the house is livable again, then that might be something he can do.
Well, it sounds like he has some options after the foundational work gets done, so to maintain things.
Yeah, and we brought the building inspector and fire in to make sure that the house was structurally okay. You know, because we weren't able to go into a lot of the house before. The fire department's concern was that there were combustible items too close to the boiler, so that those items have to be moved. The company that came to do the removal, they were hired to do the main level and the upstairs and nothing with the basement. So the basement just has to still be cleaned out still.
so when's all said and done, we wrote a letter saying certain things had to be done.
Yeah,
So when's all said and done, you'll come back to us and we will say, okay, you can live in the house.
yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, so we would then remove the placard that says that it's not fit. And then he would be able to live back in the home at that point.
So the Board of Health will vote on that based on what you and
Yeah, myself and
Uh,
Lauren.
based on what you tell us.
Yeah, that's why we take pictures. Sorry, they're not always the best pictures, but we'll take pictures too. And you know, if it meets the housing code, then there's nothing really that can prevent someone from really moving back in if you meet all of the code and there's no life-threatening violations anymore. So once everything has been cleaned, like right now, it needs to be cleaned more before you could move back in there. But the items have been removed that were the main concern items, but there's still quite a bit that has to be done.
Okay. Any other questions about that? Well, I think last on our agenda is the tobacco regulations. Lauren, you want to talk with us about our tobacco regulation update?
Yes, thank you. Just a brief update. I had been working with town council just to make sure we do this the right way, but basically, since the state updated their minimum standards for retail sale of tobacco, we have to abide by those because they're more strict now than what the Board of Health implemented in 2014. And so basically, the biggest change is just the fines. The first offense now it's $1,000, and I think ours previously was 100. Second offense is 2,000, and third offense is 5,000. And we can't. There's no wiggle room with that. That's the fine that's implemented. And so, since joining the Public Health Excellence Grant Committee, we were sort of audited by the state collectively as the 6 towns, and where we were failing was with tobacco compliance. And that's because 4 of the 6 towns, we were dropped from the Cape Cod Regional Tobacco Control Program, and they're the ones that do the compliance check with a minor. The minor goes in, attempts to buy tobacco, and a report's filled out on whether an ID is checked and was a sale completed, etc. So now that the grant group is funding that, we are able to have these compliance checks done every 6 months. So the first round was in June, and I sent letters out to all 7 of our tobacco retailers, letting them know the changes to the code, the new fines. I sent them a copy of the report. There were several that failed and several that did well. And I just sent, some information on training their employees and what to do, and then just stated, moving forward, these are going to be conducted at random. So they did another compliance check in December, and we had 3 more that failed the compliance check. So our fine letters, order letters went out to those 3 certified. So that's where we are. Those letters went out last week. So I just wanted to update on what's happening with that. But thankfully, the grant group is funding that compliance component, and we're moving on.
So 3 places received $500 fines,
$1,000. Yep.
$1,000 fines. Okay.
Yeah.
So a complaint comes in to you all. How does it all start?
So, oops, sorry.
Who do you all make surprise visits and pretend like you're 17 years old? Or?
Not us. So it's called the Cape Cod, I'm going to make sure I get this right, Cape Cod Regional Tobacco Control Program. They've been around for a long time, and Tracy can attest to that. Duxbury was part of this group ages ago. And for whatever reason, I suspect it's because we're a small town with not that many tobacco retailers, they dropped Duxbury. Because there's really no way that Tracy and I could go and do a surprise. We're,
Right.
you have to take a minor.
Right.
Yeah. So
Grab the kid, any kid, right?
The worst thing would be for me to do it.
In all honesty, they're supposed to be asking for ID for everyone, and that's what the law does state that. So And I think you can even scan IDs now, like they've made it pretty foolproof. So what happens is this person from this committee goes out with a minor and just hits all the stores in one day. And the ones where a sale is made, that's a violation. And so when I send out the letter, I also send a copy of the report so they know the date, the specific time, and they can probably tell who was working so that they can get their employees trained properly to
So
not
if
have
they
this
don't make the sale, but they don't check the ID, is that an
no,
admonishment?
this,
I think they have to make the actual sale.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
But yeah, so we were a part of that up until 2011. And then they dropped quite a few towns because, like Lauren said, they focused on the towns that had larger populations and larger amounts of tobacco establishments. And there's like most of these towns, until this grant group came about, weren't able to do certain things, and this is
Right.
one of them, so.
So, Mrs. Chen, you have your hand up patiently. Did you have a question about this subject?
I was just going to give you a little historical background because I was on the Board of Health that actually drafted the first tobacco regulations. There used to be compliance checks done in-house in town, and the high school had a group of student council type students that were trained, and quite often a faculty member or the town nurse would go out with a 17-year-old and do the compliance checks. And that's how it used to happen many moons ago. But I'm glad to hear that there's a grant group now that is doing it across the board, because there was, concern that our kids were being asked to break the law. And, but it worked out well because they were well trained. They weren't just being picked out of the student body. Thank you.
Thank you.
Becky,
That's interesting history.
Yes.
Becky, back then, was an effort made to keep it confidential as far as who was
What student?
what retail stores were doing this?
No, actually, the retail stores were brought to an open meeting of the Board of Health. And they were, after they had a letter describing the time and the place and what happened. And we determined the fine at that point, and they had a chance to quote unquote appeal, which they weren't very successful with. So, but the students who did the compliance checks were kept anonymous.
That's fair. So yeah, that makes another question in my mind, and I'm sure the answer is no. So after they're fined, they don't have to come to you with a mitigation plan, which probably would be education of their staff, right? So no mitigation plan, just pay the fine.
Right.
Essentially, they had to tell us how they were going to try. Usually they had to take their tobacco products off the shelves for anywhere from 4 weeks to several months, depending on whether it was the first offense or not.
Okay.
And we did an inspection to make sure that all the products were removed. And that usually was enough to hurt them, that they would develop some sort of training for their employees.
Yeah, so people need training. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The state regulations also state, I think after the first offense, that there are certain number of days that they could be restricted from selling any tobacco, and it goes on from there to once you get after a first offense
Okay.
Right.
within a certain time frame.
3 years, it says, or in the letters that we mailed out, it said this was your first offense in the last 3 years. So it's $1,000 fine. And then I think if there's another offense within so many days or in general, then the board can say you have to pull your tobacco for 30 days. But previously, like Becky was saying, they could request a public hearing, I think, with the Board of Health and sort of plead their case to try to either lessen the fine or lessen the action that was taken. But it doesn't seem that's the case anymore. They're kind of just dropping the hammer and refining. These are big fines to try to, you know,
Keep people in
Can they
compliance.
Can they
That was
still,
before the state found their backbone and started
Yeah.
doing more. Because the state didn't have much of a backbone for a lot of years.
mhm.
can they still have a hearing? I mean, you're saying that the fine used to be $100 and now it's $1,000?
Right. The $100 was what our supplemental rules and regs were, I believe, Tracy.
Yeah.
maybe?
Because the state didn't have any rules and
Any fine?
regulations.
Oh,
That's why we had our regulations. They were drafted, like Becky said, way back when she was, sorry, Becky, I don't mean it that way. When Becky
Many
was
moons
here.
ago.
When Becky was here, when they first drafted them, but as you recall, we've changed, remember when we raised the limit to 21 before the state actually did that?
Mhm.
So we have changed ours within the last 15 years, but now that the state supersedes our regulations, it doesn't really matter what ours said before. The state's much more strict, and they don't
Mhm.
allow you to fight the fine. It is what it is.
Do we have information on our website about that, or can we get information, a link on our website, just in case anyone's interested in reading it? The public,
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
I think I updated our website, and if I did not, I will do that
Okay.
tomorrow. I
Thank you.
feel like I did, but we'll make sure it's on there, the new
Great.
standards.
All right. Well, so our next meeting is February 22nd, and I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
All right.
All right, great. Well, thank you everyone for your time and attention, and have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you.